Welcome to Business Talk Sister Gawk. I'm Becca, and today's podcast episode topic is a building update. And that's not a very creative title, but it's okay, because I'm going to be talking a little bit about just some updates for you on my research and development project of buying an abandoned building. But before I get into that, I wanted to offer a formal apology on my brand, Business Talk Sister Gawk. And the reason for that is because I just did a 3-part series on FEMA, and it was fun, but I titled it something that is just against brand. And afterwards, I have a really great sister who used to be on this podcast with me, Ruthie, and she said, that seems pretty edgy for what the brand is supposed to be. And she was right. So I'm sorry. I really try to make this family friendly, and that was not something that was necessarily appropriate or something I would typically click on to listen to in the car with my kids. So for the record, all the content is clean as a whistle, but I know that it's not on brand, and I apologize for that. Sometimes I get too excited with marketing, and then I make decisions based on individual groupthink. I think that's an oxymoron, but anyways. Speaking of brands, however, this episode is sponsored by Diletto. And that's important for you because that's what we're doing with the building. So we'll talk a little bit about what we're putting inside and all of that in this episode. I'll just share with you a lot of the stuff that's been going on. And I know that I've really kind of been lax on sharing a lot of stuff on social media, and people have been asking me about it. So here's a little bit of an update. All right, so for some of you that have not heard the first building update or what's been going on, basically, I bought a building in Chisholm, Minnesota, and it had no power or water or heat when I bought it, and pretty dilapidated. It looked pretty nasty and dusty. So we went through the whole process of demolition. That took almost a year, doing an interior demolition, and that was quite time consuming and crazy, and lots of dumpsters and everything. We salvaged a lot of stuff that I wanted to save, and were able to give quite a few things away, like radiators, and I still have the bathtubs. And here's a little bit of history about this building. So it was built in, I believe, 1903, and that's important for anyone who's looking at buying a dilapidated building. And maybe that really should be the title of this episode, is Rehabbing a Building, because it wasn't until 1913 that they started creating lath and plaster options that had asbestos in them. Now that's huge, right? Dates are huge, because that means that if you had a building with that kind of stuff, you'd have to get a whole new kind of abatement process where you have a professional company come in that has masks and like all of the hazmat suit kind of things, and they dispose of all of that in a proper way. So thankfully, when my building was built with the lath and plaster walls, the plaster didn't include asbestos. And if you are not familiar with asbestos, you should kind of do some research on that when you're looking at buildings and what kind of products could have been made out of that, because especially, I think it was even up until like the 90s, somewhere in there, or like I guess maybe the cutoff was 85, somewhere in there was when they stopped making asbestos products, because they realized that it caused cancer and issues with your lungs. So very dangerous stuff if you start ripping it apart and it's in the air and you breathe it in. So if you're ever doing anything with like taking stuff down in an old house or whatever, make sure that you're kind of conscious of what to look for in that kind of product. Now, I didn't know a whole lot about any of that with like building materials or whatever until I was looking at a home on my first go around, and we actually did a home inspection. And the guy told us, you're not going to want to buy this house, and here's why. And he kind of walked us through how all of the siding on the house was asbestos, and he said you're not going to be able to do this on your own and dispose of it properly. So with that, though, if you have copious amounts of it, like for siding, there's a lot more that has to go into it. And so that's when I first learned, wow, there's a whole bunch of products that are made out of this. Even flooring, like linoleum floors, sometimes had asbestos in them. So lots of different products, even drop ceiling, crazy things. So definitely do your research if you're looking at getting an old building to see what you're getting into, because I think if we would have had that as an issue with this building, we would not have been able to really financially even get past that point for a very long time, probably, because it costs a lot of money to do the abatement on that. So just kind of one thing to keep in mind with the building. And I think too, like if we were to do this over again and were to find out halfway through that this was going to be something that we would have to tackle, I think it would have been a huge financial barrier. And just keep that in mind too. I really feel that there needs to be more resources available for Main Street businesses, especially that they're trying to preserve their downtowns, for asbestos abatement. And a lot of it is like only geared towards, like if there's grant funding or whatever, it's only geared towards cities and local governments. And not a ton of people are looking into ways to make it more accessible to rehabbing those like historical buildings. And that's another thing that I learned. All right. And I know I did a little bit of a podcast about this with the building in the past, so you should definitely look back through for other building updates. But we talked about being in a historical district versus being on the historical registry. Now the building that I have is on a historical block, and so this is a little bit of interesting history about where I live. So the city of Chisholm once almost entirely burned to the ground, and there was a few blocks that did not. Now, this is the interesting thing also about my building. I'm pretty sure there's been at least 4 fires in my building. And if you look at anything on Instagram that I do or whatever with the building, just kind of giving people like, hey, this is where we're at, this is what we're working on today. There's some really interesting things about like just we have tons of smoke damage to the brick of the inside of our building. But I think it kind of like makes it like the history, so I kind of kept it for just that fact alone. And interestingly enough, actually, yesterday I was talking with an electrical inspector about the way that buildings were built with no fire barriers between the walls, like where the studs got right up against the brick, where basically a fire could just creep all the way up through the side without anything stopping it. And a lot of people talk about, oh, well, it's so expensive to like add these fire barriers and everything. But like the reality is that entire towns were burning down. And that's why we have the rules we have today. And so like, especially if it's anything to do with residential where somebody wouldn't know when they're sleeping if something was on fire, there's a lot of things that are required now because of that. And I think that that's a good measure to have. But anyways, so that's what I've been learning. Just a couple things there. Next thing I was going to talk about that I think if you're looking at a building or with like research and development like this, of like, what else should I know before I get into something like this? Always get more than one quote. I think that for anything to do with like electrical or HVAC or plumbing, like I think that it's always important to get more than one quote. And I've kind of talked about this in the past, but it gives you also different perspectives. Even if you know you want a certain person, you want to go with them, like everybody's going to have a different opinion about like how you should do something. And sometimes that can be a little exhausting. But it's good to at least have somebody else have a new set of eyes on your property and tell you things that you didn't think about or like you had a whole plan for. And like one of the things that I had like probably at least 10 people look at was my idea of trying to make a walkout patio. And let me just say that like it was on my heart to do it. So I was biased, and you got to be okay with letting things go, because as I kept talking to people, they're like, no, you're going to have a water problem. Let me talk about how the water table sits. Like, look at how things need to shed. Like, mismanagement of water drainage is a huge issue with people's basements. So you need to make sure that you're draining away and like you have this kind of sloping and all this stuff. And I just was like, come on. I really just want to get lower. And to be honest, one of the reasons that I wanted to get lower than my current threshold of where my back entrance of my shop was is because it was like 5 steps down and then another set of steps, and it wasn't safe. Like, it was a lot of concrete that was broken and chipped, and it like to the point like you could almost slide down it, and like I didn't want to get anybody getting hurt. And then also I had a lot of people that would like make it into a little house. Like, they would just kind of throw a tarp over the top, and all of a sudden it was like a built-in tent, because you had to go down in a stairwell. And that wasn't really great because I, at the time, was super pregnant, and I kept having to pick up garbage of people just like doing drugs in my backyard and leaving all their garbage everywhere. And I knew that people were using this space with like all these trees and whatever else to like hide that. And it was a safety issue, right? Because I don't want my kids back there like picking up something on the ground and then all of a sudden it's a needle or whatever, like, or anybody else in the community for that matter. So we did have to like rip out all the trees back there and dig down quite a few feet. It's not a walkout, so I didn't get what I wanted, but I got close enough with still some solutions on how to like deal with the water in the future to make sure that it doesn't run back into my building and all of that. So that was like, I had to eat a lot of humble pie on the whole walkout basement. And so I would say as a business owner, a lot of times too, like you have this vision in your head of like what you want. And you're like trying to explain it to people. And honestly, sometimes your vision is just not practical. Like, and it's okay to like not have your vision totally fulfilled. And there's a compromise in there a lot of the time. So just kind of take that and recognize that like that's a piece of like being a humble business owner and making sure that you can have something that's viable and doesn't actually end up causing your business to go under sometimes, you know? So those are some things that I learned there. And then the next thing I would say is don't feel bad about making people clean up after themselves with their garbage when you have contractors coming in and doing renovations or electrician, whatever it is. Like, make sure that it's in your contract. And that's something that I've been really, really thankful about with like the business energy retrofit grant that the IRRB within my region has. And I'll just talk about that a little bit. So the IRRB is short for Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation Board. That's kind of, everybody talks about it in a short and condensed way. And that's something specific to my area. It's not something that anybody else has, so don't try to see if you have it, because I know you don't. But anyways, it's just nice for the Iron Range anyway. So with that, though, in their contract for getting somebody to do your work, it does say that they have to clean up after themselves and they have to take care of their garbage. And I wish I would have had more of that language in a lot of the stuff that I've done with other people, because I don't know how many times I've like had to take a load of stuff to the dump. Like, it's been so many runs because there wasn't anyone taking their stuff with, and it was just waste everywhere. So anyways, definitely look at that and don't feel bad when you say, and you're going to take your stuff, right? Like, this needs to go with you. So the next thing I learned, always note what bathroom people are allowed to use. I don't know why this is a problem, but apparently it is a problem. And I don't even mean like it's I just let everybody use every bathroom and it was fine. But then like you didn't check them right away and people don't know how to flush a toilet, and then it's just sitting there and then it starts smelling. It's just like wild to me. So anyways, I promise you, I know that you're probably thinking, seriously, like that's something you learned, but I'm not kidding you. It might happen to you. So make sure that you just prep because it's a thing, okay? Anyways, and I bet anybody who works in construction would be able to tell you like the egregious things that probably happen in like portable restrooms. And so I'm so thankful I didn't have to have one of those. Anyways, okay. So next thing I learned in this project, do not feel bad if you are messy, because if you clean, it's just going to get messy again in regards to like sheetrock dust and all that kind of stuff. And I know that like I'm the worst at this because I love a clean space and I love to keep things looking nice. And it was, my husband just kept having to tell me, no, let it go. And it's so cringy, okay? So anyways, but sheetrock dust is like so hard to clean up. But the best thing that I've found is you get the drywall dust bags for a shop vac. That is really great. And make sure they're the right size for your shop vac, because not all nozzles are created the same and then the bag rips, okay? Just in case you want to know. Okay, so the next thing I learned is that when people sheetrock, before they walk through, take pictures of everywhere that there's an outlet or something that needs to get plugged in or whatever that needs like a vent or something, because people are notorious for not cutting out the holes for all of the things you need. And then if somebody else comes back in, and this is like apparently an industry thing too, where like say electricians or plumbers, they get really mad at the sheetrockers and then they will just start busting holes in everything, looking for wherever their plumbing was or wherever their outlet was that they were supposed to be wiring. And then you just have like all these holes, and then people have to come back through and fix it. And obviously like you want to have good people that you work with and they have a good relationship, so they're not like super crabby and like basically rip open all your walls again, which is actually a thing. So like just kind of pay attention to that. But if you do have that problem and you know there's supposed to be an outlet there and they covered it, to have those pictures and say it's right here, because otherwise you have to walk around with like a little metal detector or whatever else to figure out where things are in the wall, and that shouldn't be your job anyways as a business owner. Like they should just do it, right? But whatever. Anyways, so I learned always take pictures before the walls go up. And I would say in general, if you're having somebody do something from like top to bottom for you, always have them take progress pictures if you can't be on site of like what they did before they close up a wall. Because if somebody says like, oh yeah, I insulated that, and then they put up a wall, like you have no way of checking unless you rip open the wall. So make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing to send you the pictures, or like for you to walk through and see it yourself. Who knew this entire podcast was going to be about construction? Okay, I promise I'll tell you a little bit about something else. Okay, so what is Diletto? What are we doing? Okay, so we purchased this space, have been working on it, and I will say, like, you know, when you do something like this big, you have to put in a lot of your own hours too. We are putting in an art gallery / artist studio, and even though we're just at the end here, we just passed an electrical inspection. Woo, woo, big deal. And then we are going to be getting that last certificate of occupancy to be having our soft opening pretty soon here. So mark your calendars, because this month, March 2025, we're shooting for a soft opening on the 23rd from 4 to 6 p.m. So just a quick, if you're in the area or if you need to ride at the airport, we can figure it out. Let me know. But it's going to be exciting. We're going to have Beth Jackson, who is a watercolor artist, featuring her Honest Americana series. We've actually had them on display in the windows for the last month. So the rest of that collection is going to be coming to the building, and people are going to stop by. And quite honestly, you may have no idea where we are. So it's 123 West Lake Street, just in case you're wondering. And yeah, hopefully I don't get a bunch of stalkers from this. But anyways, so it's going to be really fun because this is like the first time in 2 years I'm seeing a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. So why art gallery? Well, that is a great question, and I will tell you all about that in the next episode. For the gawk portion of this episode, I'm going to tell you something completely ridiculous. It has nothing to do with anything, but I will just share today. I've been fighting a migraine like all day. And a couple days ago, I went to a client meeting and I brought a package of beef sticks with me. And like it was a brand new package of beef sticks. I got them out of my fridge, brought them with, shared them, whatever, ate them. Well, then like I was going on a site visit, so I threw them in my bag. And apparently for the last day or two, they've been in my backpack. And I didn't realize it until I started getting a migraine today. And all of a sudden, everything, like, you know, your senses, like any kind of smells, whatever, just really bothers you. And I'm just smelling this smell. And I'm like, what is going on? And all of a sudden, I open up my backpack. And it's just like this aroma of beef sticks. And they're not bad. They're not spoiled or anything. But like, they're just very pungent. I almost threw up. It was so strong. Anyways, so I had to like put the beef sticks somewhere else, not near me, because it was just so strong. And anyways, so I just skipped all of lunch today because that was like way too much smell for me to handle. But it was pretty funny, mostly because I feel like that would be like a prank that one of my kids would play on me or I would play on someone else, but I did it to myself on accident. Anyways, thanks for joining me on this episode about building updates and what's all happening with us as a business. And if you are enjoying what you're hearing or learned something, give it a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.